And good evening. It's August 1st, 2024, and welcome to another one of our branches on the vine with the Bible Project and the Sermon on the Mount series. So the Bible Project, they created this series to cover an entire year. Every 5 weeks, they're going to release another episode. Now, we're going to take some time to discuss each of these videos and other creative topics that they present to us along the way. Because the videos that we're going to be talking about, they're just the tip of the iceberg. They're part of a learning series that I highly recommend, and they can all be found on the Bible Project app. Link to that is in the description. So, welcome to the evening as we continue to discuss episode 6 of Sermon on the Mount, Don't Give, Pray, or Fast in Public, on the Dusty Feet. And of course, before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, it's when you click that subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, that's when you click that like button, because that is the way that YouTube chooses to share these to more people, if they wish. So this sermon, again, is found in Matthew 5 through 7, and for me, this is the seminal moment in the teachings of Jesus. Because this is his longest, deepest, widest teaching we have recorded in all of Scripture. And it covers things that we love to talk about. But I think deep down, we really have challenges living this every day. Sermon on the Mount, Episode 6, Don't Give, Fast, or Pray in Public. This is our part 4 of 4. We're going to wrap this up, but let's watch the video. Let's see where it takes us. Enjoy.
Jesus of Nazareth, one of the most influential people in history, taught that the truly good life flows out of a close, intimate relationship with the creator of the universe.
Yeah, Jesus believed this was the ultimate treasure of human existence, receiving God's love. And Jesus said, doing righteousness is our response by giving that love back out to others.
Now, Jesus also lived in a culture where showing your devotion to God publicly will increase your reputation. So, it would be easy to turn your intimacy with God into a performance to get public praise.
Exactly. And so, in a group of his teachings called the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus warns his followers about that temptation.
Be careful that you don't do your righteousness in front of people for the purpose of being seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in the skies. So, acting like you're close with God might gain you social status or applause.
But, Jesus says, that's really all you're going to get. Jesus describes this performance as being a hypocrite, which comes from the Greek word hypokrites, which refers to a stage actor putting on a show.
So, how can I know if I'm becoming a hypocrite? That seems like an easy trap.
Yeah, it's super easy. And so Jesus offers 3 case studies. He uses the 3 most common ways in his day that Jewish people expressed their devotion to God, beginning with generosity.
So then, when you give generously to those in need, don't signal it with a trumpet, as the hypocrites do in the town squares or streets. They do that to be honored by people. And I tell you the truth, they have fully received their reward.
So, in Jesus' culture, public displays of generosity were a way to celebrate God's generous love. But they could also become a way to promote yourself.
So Jesus offers an alternative. When you give generously to those in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving is done privately. And your Father who sees what is done in private, he will fully reward you.
So, one foolproof way to make sure your generosity is really done out of love is to do it in ways other people can't see.
But didn't Jesus also teach to let your light and good deeds shine as an example for others?
Well, yes. When you consider all of Jesus' teachings on generosity, we see he regularly called his followers to give generously because it displays the heartbeat of God's love. But be careful and self-critical, he says. If there's even a hint of inner hypocrisy, it's probably wise to do your giving in private.
It would be easier if Jesus just gave one clear rule.
Maybe, but what he's given us is wisdom. And that forces us to cultivate a closer relationship with God, trusting that he'll show us when to give in private or more publicly. He makes the same point in his second case study about prayer.
And when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray while standing where people gather or on street corners so that they can be seen by people. I tell you the truth, they have fully received their reward.
In Jesus' culture, most Jewish people stopped whatever they were doing multiple times a day, and they prayed a traditional prayer from the Torah called the Shema. Jesus himself was known for his consistent devotion to prayer. But be careful, he says, because even your prayer habits can become a strategy for public praise.
Right, I can imagine the temptation to conveniently find yourself on a busy street corner when prayer time comes. I mean, people will think I'm really devout.
And if that's what you're after, congratulations. You will probably get people's admiration, but that's all. So Jesus suggests a different way.
But when you pray, go into a room, shut the door, so you can pray to your Father in private. And your Father, who can see what's done in private, he will reward you.
Prayer is about spending time with God, sharing your thoughts and concerns, and trusting that he will hear and respond. The easiest way to check your motives for praying is to do it when no one can see. But again, this is not a rule, it's wisdom. Jesus prayed alone and also together with his followers. Both are important ways of connecting to God.
The third example Jesus gives is about fasting. When you all fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites. They make their faces look disfigured, so their fasting will be seen by others. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward.
So fasting is a way of praying with your body by withholding your own physical needs like food and drink, and then inviting God's presence to meet you in that place of need.
But even fasting can be used as a performance.
Yes, so be careful, like Jesus says.
But when you fast, anoint your head with oil, wash your face, so your fasting isn't visible to anyone except your Father in private, and he will reward you.
Now, notice that in all three cases, Jesus does not say to ditch these practices.
Right, express your devotion, but find creative ways to do it so that you don't treat God's love like a trophy.
Jesus knows that his followers will be most effective in the world when they care the least about their social standing, because their ultimate goal is simply to know and be known by the God of generous love.
We just looked at 3 warnings for those committed to a relationship with God. And one of those was about prayer.
Next, we'll look at the very center of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus teaches his followers how to pray.
So, what'd you think? One of the things that I like about the Bible Project videos, I mean, all of them as a whole, is that they're launching points. They just get the ball rolling. I mean, very seldom is there an entire teaching there, right? The entire point made. This is but the beginning of much larger discussions. Again, I highly suggest that you take advantage of their app because they tie in other videos, visual commentary, and they have their own podcast with lengthier discussion. But these from the Sermon on the Mount, they're the tip of the iceberg, so let's look underwater, see what we might find. So tonight we're going to wrap up this video, this episode 6 of Sermon on the Mount, because I've really enjoyed discussing the previous 3 parts so far. So this wisdom advice, it takes us to another part also that's not instructed, also that it's not commanded. It takes us to fasting. We had examples, at least, of what we share through the writers about Jesus's generosity towards others. I mean, his first recorded, I'm not sure it's his first, but we have the water into wine. I tend to think this falls under his expression of generosity towards others. Yet we see that in the healings and such, so many others, and yes, still he always made sure that folks knew that it was from the Father and not from him. And we have many examples, many instances of where Jesus often he would go off to pray alone. He went off, or he sent them ahead. So he had time to have his private prayer time with his Father. But this next point, this next case question involves something that we've not seen before or even heard a teaching about from Jesus. But they needed to ask the question. Because John the Immerser, right, the Baptist, was a very influential rabbi, right? He was a prophet in the wilderness, right, in that area along the Jordan River. He had followers or disciples as well. They were very loyal and supportive of him, and they came a few times to talk to Jesus. You know, even a few of Jesus' disciples were former disciples of John, so they too would be aware of the practices, the traditions that John taught. So this question comes up more than once, so Jesus needs to address it. Again, the viewpoint that Jesus takes is that what it looks like on the outside versus what should be going on the inside. It's being looked at, right, by both, by God and by people, because both are seeing this. They're just expecting different things. Notice Jesus is not addressing any questions about a specific reason, right? He's addressing the heart, the why expression, as I tend to call it. Jesus' wisdom advice here, again, it takes us back inside, back away from the outside. No one's going to notice. No one's going to know. So it seems that the heart check might be in, then who should know? Jesus says, only his Father. But with that in context, probably the next question to follow then might be, well, how do we do what we do? And then that heart question of why. Example, we have communities all around, and they might have a fast, a group fast or a church-wide fast. Again, the point of the question is, do we have a practice or a tradition that bumps up against this wisdom advice? I'll even go with it being of good intent. But the can is one thing. The should, maybe that's another. Like in each of these case points, all are addressing what the look is from the outside and what they might see. Because then we get into how they venture, maybe how they would then perceive it, right? But Jesus continues to bring us back to the why and the how, well into this wisdom advice, because he seems to lean heavily on what? On its not being known, not being recognized, not being seen. These three case points, these parts of our practices, our traditions, our lives, and how they're seen by others, how they're perceived by others. Should they be seen by others? Should they be perceived by others? Okay, I'm not saying that any of the aforementioned traditions or practices that they're wrong or that they're bad. But I am asking us to be willing to pick up a Jesus mirror and look. Because Jesus is asking them to do the exact same thing. We just tend to think they would never be us. I think we might be surprised. Yeah, so I liked how Tim and John put it, where they were going, that Jesus is not telling them not to do these things. But unlike those in the examples, when he's talking about them not, he's expecting them to do a heart check, that creative graphic where we go from the outside to the inside in the videos. Because we creatively, we love to find ways around doing things, right? Because it's the way we like to do them, or because it's the way we've been told to do them, how I've been taught to do them. You know, that's really what this whole sermon is about at the core. It's about our life, our daily life. And in this context, a lot of the reflection on how that's viewed by others on the outside looking in. Because how do we walk this out? How do we do this on our journey? How do I pick up my walking stick on our journey as we all wander with others through this every day? And I think if we listen and we heed the wisdom advice, I think we're going to see then that reflection, because Jesus seems to be pointing to his Father's ways, right? The way. I think how that was reflected, I think that's reflected in our choices. But I love the way that Tim put it at the end, that we need to know, and then we need to be known by this God of, and he used the word generous love. I love that thought, and one of the reasons that I do, especially, it's because David wanted that more than anything. I mean, more than anything. He wanted to be loved and known by, he wanted to be seen by God. He didn't want God's face to turn away from him. That was his greatest fear. David's greatest fear was that God's face would turn away from him, to be unknown by God, turn his back. That's the real fear, the terror of not being in the book of life. It's because you're not known. You're not recognized. You're not even recorded. To be known by and loved by this God, that's the ultimate, that's the peak of life. Because even in chastisement, we're still in the focus, guidance, and correction of this God, this just and merciful God. We see that in the lives of David, Daniel, the disciples. Jesus points us to this, how God's face is going to be turned towards you. He will see you all of the time, even if others don't. You know, especially if others shouldn't. Why? Because that's not the purpose. Giving, praying, fasting, all elements that are very much a part of a follower of God life. And then to be fair in those, some are in Torah and some are not. Yet very much they're still a part of everyday life. And Jesus took the time to do this, to give us this wisdom advice. And then maybe that it might look like this. He gave us starting points, just like Torah, wisdom from his Father, and how this wisdom will be reflected in our lives and how that reflects to others. So do we consider this? Do we choose to put on the sandals of the characters in these stories, see where we, with a mirror, well, we might actually see ourselves in those. And then if we do, then what do we do about it? Do we just keep trudging along? Or do we change course? You know, I can't wait to get in the next section, because we're right smack at the central point with in the middle of these three case studies is the Lord's Prayer. That's the center of the Sermon on the Mount. And if you appreciate chiastic structure, we're at the middle of the middle. So this is where we need to be aware of the importance of this part of the story. So this next section, like they showed us, is in chapter 6, verses 5 through 15. The Lord's Prayer, 5 through 15. It's going to be fun. Don't forget, Description below is a link to the folks at the Bible Project and a link to the app so you can follow along and see each one as they premiere and the additional topics that they discuss. Because this will continue to be an exciting and thought-provoking journey into the Sermon on the Mount. I wonder what we're going to continue to uncover. Next, we're going to get into part 7, and I'm so excited. That is just around the corner. So, thanks for with us tonight, with more with this Sermon on the Mount, on another episode of The Dusty Feet.